Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. This episode of the New Stack Makers is sponsored by Oracle. Oracle Cloud Native Labs is here to empower the next generation of cloud practitioners with a curated set of solutions, tutorials, and best practices, all designed to spark inspiration, drive hands-on experience, and unleash our industry's potential. Hey, it's Alex Williams here at KubeCon plus Cloud Native Con North America in San Diego, and today I'm lucky to have the Oracle team here as our guests. Bob Quillen.
Good to be here.
Bob is Vice President of Cloud Developer Relations. Caslin Fields. There's Caslin, Cloud Developer Advocate at Oracle. And Karthik Gaikwad, how are you?
Good. Great to be here.
And you're a principal member of the technical staff at Oracle. And my first question is actually for you.
All right.
And I wanted to ask about the enterprise. Where do you think the enterprise is with Cloud Native today?
Sure, that's a great question. So we see a lot of enterprises, like Oracle works a lot with enterprises, but one of the things that we kind of saw from O'Reilly, from Tech Radar, is they did a survey earlier this year, and they said 65 or 68% of enterprises have started to adopt cloud native, whether that's containers, whether that's Kubernetes, or one of the other projects in the cloud native stack. There's a lot of interest in wanting to run, cloud native applications, cloud native services inside of larger enterprises. We see a lot of that as well, inside of Oracle Cloud, where folks are really interested in figuring out, how to use containers, how to use a managed Kubernetes service, things like that to run a lot of the workloads. But it's super healthy inside a large enterprise today, where we want enterprises to actually want to use a lot of the benefits of the cloud native world. For the software.
Interesting. So, are they doing one thing at a time? Are they trying to work concurrently on projects? What do you see from them? Do you see them trying to adopt Kubernetes and then also trying to adopt service mesh technology? Are they trying to take things slowly? I'm sure there's kind of a range, but curious.
A lot of folks try and do containers first. So they always start off with, a specific use case, like, hey, I have this large monolith, I'm trying to break it up. How do I do that? I really want to use containers for it. So a lot of folks that I've talked to, recently have been like, I have this use case, how do I, Kubernetes-fy this specific thing? So typically you see them starting with containers, deploying it on top of Kubernetes. Figuring out what the value add of using something like Kubernetes, whether it's the managed Kubernetes service or if it's running it by yourself, and then they kind of say, okay, well, how do you monitor this application? How do you log for it? And start kind of biting off pieces of the cloud native stack from that perspective. So it starts off like high level containers, and then kind of drills down a little bit deeper, like how do you do security? How do you manage a lot of these services together, etc.
Right. So Bob, with that in mind, that as a context,
Sure. Yeah.
There's a lot going on at KubeCon this year for Oracle. Can you give us an update?
Yeah, it kind of plays into where Karthik was talking about where enterprises are and where they're going. We have 3 products coming out from Oracle Cloud that we're announcing at the show this week. One is the Oracle API Gateway, which really focuses on integration, and one of the big issues enterprises are seeing is how do they bring all their components together, be it a on-premise application they're trying to connect into the cloud. API Gateway is a great way to do that. We have Oracle Functions, which is based upon the FN project, it's an open source project. And Oracle Functions is our Oracle Cloud service for serverless. Providing APIs and putting a RESTful API on top of the functions allows people to access that through other applications. Kubernetes applications exposing their APIs. Also, SaaS applications all have RESTful APIs too, and we have a huge base of customers, HCM, human capital management, ERP, supply chain, customer experience, all those have RESTful APIs. So as people are trying to connect their business processes together, building new applications, or even taking an old application and connecting those in. The API gateway is a big way to do that, and that's a big announcement for us, providing a way to bring kind of the glue that holds all those pieces together and provides a management console for that too. So that's kind of the first major announcement. Second one kind of goes along the lines of open source technologies. We're announcing a Kafka connector for our streaming service, and Kafka being the Apache Kafka standard with IoT and Edge and all the flood of event services coming in and real-time events, either be financial services or be it with smart devices, the Edge, cars, IoT, whatever. Those are all coming in and creating incredible pressure on new cloud-native infrastructure. So having the Kafka connector is a big next step for our streaming service, broadening the outreach into kind of open source. And that leads us to kind of the third one we're announcing, which is the Oracle logging service, which provides common and unified logging for all the services across OCI, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, but also has a FluentD agent that can connect into other cloud-native standards using FluentD, which is the logging standard within Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Yeah. So it's ways to connect in with Apache, Kafka, the gateway. All these things are kind of building blocks to help enterprises move to the cloud and provide kind of the salient material to connect all those things together.
Mm-hmm. Connecting it all together. One question I have, maybe for you, Caslin, is how all these connections through open source and the CNCF really play into the strategy that Oracle is adopting. How, in particular, I'm thinking about your cloud native framework and the vision strategy behind that.
Yeah, so sometimes it surprises people that open source is actually a huge component of Oracle's entire cloud strategy. From the very beginning, we designed our cloud around what our customers needed, and we saw that our customers really wanted to have open source. They wanted to avoid cloud lock-in. They wanted to be able to use tools that they were already using today just in our cloud. There's all sorts of benefits with that, so we decided to embrace that and help make it a really strong area for people who are moving into our cloud. So we've based a lot of our managed services off of open source tools. For example, we have a managed Terraform service. Like we were saying, streaming.
Yeah.
We work with Kafka. Logging, we work with FluentD.
Event services, the common event framework.
We're working with CNCF to create a cloud events framework for our event service, which is very exciting. I think that just hit its first release, actually.
Which project's that?
It's called Cloud Events.
That's what I
It's
thought.
just the name of it.
Right. That's right.
Yep.
And all those standards are starting to come together as as building blocks for developers, and it kind of goes to Kubernetes being kind of the platform of it all. Our Garth's going to talk about the Kubernetes service that we have too. So maybe start with that.
Well, I mean, it is for us, like the Kubernetes service is really huge. I remember being on the development team for it, and we were looking at a Gen 2 version of our container service. Which we had written for Oracle for the V1 version of the cloud, and we were like, we should just be using Kubernetes for this because that's where the world is going, and it is an open standard. So why not actually have a managed Kubernetes service? I'm really glad we did that because that's kind of like where the world is today, which is very different from where we were like 10, 15 years ago, where open source wasn't it was open source, but there weren't a lot of projects out there. That were kind of out there to begin with. So it's a new world we live in, and people in enterprises and just developers in general kind of want to base a lot of the choices that they make from open source. So I'm glad we as a company are kind of embracing that.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious then about how this plays into how you see the CNCF developing overall. Do you expect this momentum to continue? With these open source projects, is it proving commercially viable, do you think, for businesses out there who are the customers? And do you see any change in reflection in them in terms of more DevOps oriented or oriented more towards open source and developing their own open source strategies?
Yeah. Well, the cultural challenges are probably one of the biggest ones to talk about, right?
Yeah, there's a lot going into that. I definitely think that the CNCF is doing really well. They've got a lot of companies that are just itching to be part of the CNCF, and a lot of companies that have joined the CNCF as members and as users of cloud native technologies that the CNCF kind of helps
Facilitate all
kind
that.
of garden foster, yeah.
Yeah.
So certainly the technologies are doing great. We're at KubeCon right now, and I'm sure it's going to be gigantic this year. So.
I think, Bobby, you're saying almost
Yeah.
every room you saw was full today.
Yeah, and I think there's 13,000 people here or something like that.
Yeah.
30% more than like the last conference. So it's booming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No,
the ecosystem.
Yeah, the ecosystem is there. And it's also good to see kind of the groups that are coming in, enterprises are coming. I was in one of the sessions this morning, and there was like 80-90% of people, this was the first KubeCon.
Yep.
I'm like, well, that's, that shows people are beginning to transition to to this training and bringing more folks in and under the big umbrella. And because there are challenges. We see it particularly from the enterprise side of, the culture, the complexity, and all those kind of things. Gaston talks a lot about the cultural challenges. I'll probably hand it to you to dive into some of those, where people are moving and some of the ways we can help them too. So.
Yeah, so I recently gave a talk at All Day DevOps that was titled A Geek's Guide to DevOps Cultural Transformation. So that was kind of based on my experience. I tell people that my job at Oracle is when a customer says the word containers or Kubernetes or any cloud native word, they're just like, Kaslin, come here, come talk to them. So that talk was about what I've learned about.
The Kaslin spotlight goes up in the sky.
Yeah, It's the Kaslin signal. It kind of looks like the Kubernetes logo for some reason. So what I've learned about the ways that the enterprises are adopting it and the challenges they're facing, I think 80 to 90% of people at KubeCon being new speaks a lot to the challenges that the companies are facing and how they're trying to address them. They don't have those skills right now to do this cloud native stuff. So they know that's a gap, and they're learning that they have to help their employees learn so that they can embrace this new world.
But the one thing that's really good about it is that, and we've kind of seen this from a DevOps perspective where, DevOps has been around for like 10, 15 years at this point, but, you go to a DevOps Days event, and you do end up seeing like 50% of people that are like brand new, never been to a DevOps event, want to understand, how to do DevOps, and very similar to the, the cloud native world where you do have the new folks coming in, not to understand, some of the like specifics, but just understand like the ecosystem in general, where they're wanting to use, Kubernetes, they're wanting to use like a Prometheus or something in the infrastructure. So it's not like, hey, I'm skeptical about this ecosystem. It's just a genuine, I'd like to use this, for my applications. How do I go about that? So it kind of signifies that the ecosystem itself is like super healthy from that perspective.
Excellent. And I remember when you launched your cloud service, it was a few years back, in Oracle Cloud. Maybe you could take us back to that point and how you see its origins and now its development and how that fits with a cloud native services approach.
Yeah, I think that's a Kaslin question.
You want me to take that one? I like to tell that story.
That's your story. I'll let you do that one.
Yeah. So every now and then I'm asked to give kind of an introduction to Oracle Cloud and where it came from and why we are what we are. Sometimes those are really funny because people have been following Oracle for a long time, and they know that there was a time when Oracle was not so interested in the cloud space.
Not so cloudy.
Yeah. So how did this happen? How did Oracle decide to have a cloud? And our story is different from other cloud providers, which I think is very interesting for our customers and for all of us who work there.
So, yeah.
And we decided to create this cloud when the cloud already existed. Unlike Amazon and Azure and the other earlier clouds, they built something for themselves to use to help solve their own business need, which was getting resources to their own internal employees. Then they decided to make that a public product, and that's kind of where the cloud came from. For us, our customers were coming to us saying, we want to use this public cloud thing that Amazon and Azure and these other providers have created, but we're seeing these problems, we want to do things like this, and we would hear all of this feedback, and we went, well, we could try and help with that.
And it was always enterprise feedback, security, performance, scale, all the things that they trust us for. with an enterprise application, kind of what Oracle is known for. So they wanted to see that in the cloud, which they weren't seeing from other clouds too. So
Yeah, so that's how we decided to create our cloud, and it's been quite the journey.
The whole team up in Seattle, a lot of folks who came out of those other clouds, and it might be the last chance to build a hyperscale cloud. This might be the last one because there's not. I mean, the resources to build a hyperscale cloud are not there for. I mean, there's hardly any. There's about 3 or 4 left, right? So so I think it's actually an interesting point in time to see, Oracle doing this, building data centers. I think we're at 16 now, 20 at the end of the year, 36 by next year. So they're putting a lot of
We're trying to shoot for 1 a month or something.
Yes, yeah. So the pace is incredible, and it's exciting to be in the middle of that opportunity, and then be there also from the developer side and cloud native side to help customers take advantage of that, building the managed services that help them conquer all that complexity that they deal with. They look at all the information that's here. I mean, I'm struck by several sessions I saw this morning on service mesh, and it was Google talking about how they used service mesh technology, and it was also talking about how several enterprises or big enterprises built their own service mesh, which took me back 3 or 4 years ago to other KubeCons where everyone was just getting started with Kubernetes. They're building their own Kubernetes, and now everyone's just using a service, a managed service. So that in that last 2 years, managed services just took over and eliminated all that complexity. You could leapfrog across there and start using all these new cloud services at scale with all the security and enterprise goodness that we talked about. And I think service mesh is that next level up, and in the next year or two, we'll start seeing more and more people leap into that. But a managed service needs to be there to kind of help guide the way. So I think that's exciting to see the maturation. Everyone working their way up the ladder of complexity, one rung at a time. So,
Right. Yeah. Right, and it goes to that kind of discussion about the approach you take and how you pursue that, which goes into the cultural issues. My question really then is about how do cloud native services fit into Oracle Cloud as you expand? If you are opening 1 data center per month, what is what is that kind of that parallel acceleration in cloud native services that goes with Oracle Cloud?
Yeah, so I mean, every new data center opens with all the services that we offer.
Yep.
And as we launch a new service, it has to be launched in all the new data centers too. So and it's exciting also to see where we're opening data centers are people that have unique in-country requirements or governance requirements that may not have a data center available to them. And AWS might be the de facto place people choose in North America, but in different parts of the world, they're not available or they're not as trusted, maybe, or they're not as well known. So it's kind of a different model as you get to different parts where, an Oracle Enterprise customer who's built, runs a big government application, the data has to stay there. There's a lot of data gravity, obviously, with Oracle applications. And they want to have the data center there that has the security and the governance and all the compliance things that go with that. So, but they just don't want the old stuff too. They want new cloud native. They want to move and improve. It's not just lift, shift, and plop it in there. It's also about moving and improving while you go and taking advantage of all these new ways to accelerate delivery and to have more agility as a business, all those elements that kind of make cloud native what it is. So I don't know, did I miss anything there?
I feel like you covered a lot.
Yeah, sorry. I rambled a bit there.
No, and I do think it's important that one of the good things about going to different events, especially for our team, is we actually hear from customers, prospective customers, about what they like about the services we have, and what they're kind of missing, or what they're kind of looking for. Logging service kind of comes from that, where it's people were using FluentD, but it was kind of hard to set up, and they had to set up their own EFK, the Elastic FluentD and Kibana stacks by default, and there was a challenge there to actually getting started. So that ended up becoming a managed service for us, and it's great to kind of get that feedback and give it back to our product management, who's always kind of listening to customers, listening to us to kind of figure out what's going to be the next thing that we're going to release. So we kind of take that approach for our cloud, which is a little bit different from some of the other clouds as well. And it's working out really well for us, because we get a consensus of, hey, we're missing this thing. We should really be focusing our time and effort to actually build out this specific service going forward. So that's kind of where some of our stuff comes from.
Yeah, that's something that I'm really proud of that Oracle does. I sit with a lot of the PMs in Seattle, and I see all of the work they do to try and make sure that they're listening to customers and incorporating feedback into their designs. And of course, I bring them feedback from the events that I go to. They have their own technical advisory boards where they bring customers in and show them what they're working on and get their feedback. So it's something that I'm really proud of that Oracle does.
I'm interested in learning more about how you view the architecture for Oracle Cloud Native Services, and and I was looking at this this graphic that shows OCI services, and then how you think about app development and management in action, and I think I'd love to get kind of a breakdown on each of these announcements for like the streaming capabilities, the API gateway capabilities, and then the final one being the what was the third one? The logging, right? And so they all, the event streaming and the logging all have management capabilities, and the app and the API gateway really has app development focus.
Yeah.
What can you explain kind of why you decided to develop it in this manner?
Yeah, I think there's always this balance between providing development tools to assemble the application and the observability and operational tools to manage it. And you got to have the balance between the two. And I think if you go one side or the other, you're going to keep that balance. So as you develop the tools and having the sort of development services like an API gateway, that's a critical part of developers exposing APIs, being able to manage them, connect applications together. But once you deploy it, you got to have all the DevOps tooling to support it. And observability is such a huge theme right now in terms of being able to manage and monitor and log and understand all the things that are going on across the application, that it's you can't have one without the other. It's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They have to be working together. So chocolate and peanut butter.
Yeah. I hear you.
I was thinking of mints to do a Christmas thing.
So so the API gateway then, fits in. How does it fit with you in terms of the story around functions and container engine registry, for example?
I could
Any of us.
I could take that and jump in. With functions in particular, with API Gateway, now you can expose all the RESTful APIs and services for those functions. So any other service or application in Oracle Cloud you develop can access that. So you have a serverless function that now is exposed and can be kind of a full-class citizen within an application. And since it's a standard API that's managed through the API Gateway, you can have standard security, standard access control, and a way to manage that from a central location. So that's kind of an operational part of any DevOps environment, is to be able to set up how things integrate, what zones and what security and what access control is allowed. And then the functions in particular can take advantage of all that. Then you're able to connect functions into SaaS applications and Kubernetes applications, or even on-premise applications. And and you throw in edge and streaming and what's going on with IoT. A lot of serverless is moving to the edge with compute.
Right.
So the ability to run serverless functions on the edge becomes even more relevant as you can now expose those APIs and take advantage of that.
Yeah, and you touched on the interoperability part between the Kubernetes service that we have, the function service that we have. One thing we heard a lot from customers is like, hey, I'm using both, and I need a way to be able to seamlessly connect this up from a service perspective. How do I do that? And it was interesting to us because we figured that when you start with Kubernetes, you'd kind of go deep into that stack, but I think when you provide a service, people want to actually use all of the different services out there, and having something like API Gateway in the front of that gives you the ability to kind of run whatever you want behind the scenes, whether it is Kubernetes, whether it's functions, etc., to run your workloads, etc., and have one single unified way to be able to call that from a REST API standpoint.
You need a hammer, sometimes you need a screwdriver. You want to have all the tools there to assemble everything you need. So not just one.
Yeah. And to come back to the question before, where it's I feel like we can't release all app dev stuff first and then release DevOps stuff before or after, because services like people or in companies typically when they use the service, they have to be able to actually manage that service as well. So if you don't give them tools and capabilities to be able to do that, like stuff just doesn't really work. So you'll always kind of notice hey, we'll have like a brand new announcement with a brand new service that's more tailored to development, but also a lot of the services that we will release that will fit to the DevOps teams out there, so that they can actually manage that as a part of like a unified cloud offering.
It's an interesting discussion about the management aspect of it, and that's where I think it's this topic of event management is becoming a more discussed topic. We're hearing about it a lot more, and I'm interested in learning more about your interest in these event store databases to accompany streaming services. And I'd love to get an explanation from you about how these event store databases are unique from other SQL relational databases. What is the difference there?
So I want to jump into database stuff? Or?
I always avoid it if I can.
So it's interesting. The world of databases has come a long way, right? So we used to do everything in SQL before, or a lot of things used to happen in SQL before, and then we went through a phase where we had like no SQL, and now we have a lot of events coming out, and Kafka is like really well suited to be able to ingest events and kind of like do things with those kind of procedures. Sure, you can do it, with other, like you can use SQL in there, or you can use like NoSQL in there or whatever, but it doesn't really like fit a lot of those use cases really well. So that's kind of where, from our standpoint, like the events stuff that we have, it's Kafka capable, so you can actually use the APIs and stuff the same way. So you can get the data streams that go in. You can use Kafka behind the scenes to be able to interpolate or whatever with the data.
And that's mostly for day two customer, I would expect. And, the application development on one side of it, and then the event streaming and logging management on the management side.
Sure.
Yeah, and Oracle's known for a relational database, but we're a multi-model data company too now,
right?
And support a wide range of data and data science on top of that, because data now resides in many different places in many different ways, and the autonomous database supports a lot of those models too. So having that multi-model approach that a developer can use and doesn't have to choose one in particular is a very helpful thing. Gives them a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, it's very much like people don't only want to use Kubernetes; they also want to use serverless. They also want to use traditional applications. Right. So the same analogy kind of goes with data too. They're not just there to use SQL, and from an ATP perspective, you can actually use SQL. You can also do like NoSQL stuff in there. Like you can kind of do like many different things with a single database.
Autonomous. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Database.
And so the customer or like the enterprises came today where it's like you can actually choose from a development point of view like what you want to do, and then find the technology that actually does that behind the scenes, and you don't have to be pigeonholed with starting with the technology and then figuring out how to use it for your specific use case.
It makes me wonder then about how a company like Oracle, which has a broad offering, and as you state, it's well beyond databases now, and there's such a selection that people can choose from now, and a lot of software development though is open source. So I'm curious about how you pick your communities to work with.
Yeah, well, we let CNCF lead the way in a lot of them, and customers tell us what they want to use. We've got a big history with Oracle Linux and Java and MySQL, so we have communities that are already in the open source world that have been part of what Oracle has been for many, many years, and we've contributed deeply into those communities. And then what we're doing with open source, it is customer driven, and the demand comes out of the customer base that says we want to have the flexibility to run multi-cloud. We want to be able to pick the cloud provider we want to use by having this common platform. So the open source technology is driven from the customers. It becomes organic, and it's not just a top down. Here's the solution you're going to use. And the flexibility gives people that framework to be able to have the agility to do what they want to do.
And I think the breadth that we've mentioned several times in this, we're doing app dev, we're doing DevOps, we're doing all of this stuff in different regions. We've got all of these different types of databases. It's all reflective of our focus on customers and especially enterprise customers. With enterprises, they're these very large entities. No one team is doing exactly the same thing. Everybody's doing things a different way. So we have to have a lot of capabilities to be able to enable our enterprise customers that are doing all of these different things at once.
I'm interested in particularly the latest developments in the FN community. Are there any new developments in the community there that relate to functions? I just have been following your development in that space for a while, and I'm just curious if there's any interesting new developments there.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the work that we've been focused on internally have been turning the FN project and that goodness into a service,
Yep.
And then contributing that back into the FN project itself. And now we've reached GA status. There's been a lot of kind of new capabilities that have gone into it. I think we're seeing, a huge amount of interest on the FN project side, but in an equal amount coming now from the Oracle Functions side of things from an Oracle Cloud Managed Service perspective. Standing up your serverless project is fun, and it's good good in the lab, good in the dev environment, but now people are beginning to say, now I want to have the managed service to go with it, kind of like what we've seen with the progression with Kubernetes going from do-it-yourself to a managed service. And we'll continue to contribute and support the FN project. But as a managed service now, they have choice, which is kind of what you want to have with open source. And you're not locked in. So, and that's been the question I think a lot of people will continue to ask. And each KubeCon, the question comes up again is where's the standardization going to come from around serverless? And so I think I have no new news there, but I keep my ear out for all that stuff. So.
Maybe we could just, for the last few minutes here, look forward a little bit. And, we're coming into the end of the year, and 2020 is coming up quick. And you've talked a lot about, the CNCF and the communities you're involved with and your development both on the app side and the management side. What are some of the developments, both internally and externally that you're thinking about as you go into 2020? A lot of companies are moving more deeper into open source. They're putting more engineering resources into open source. They're contributing more to projects. They're actually introducing new projects. I would love to hear how Oracle is building itself out in that context.
I mean, it's one of the things people don't really think about Oracle. We have thousands of applications and tens of thousands of developers, and they're all top down from dictated by Larry to use Oracle Cloud. So everything is going on Oracle Cloud, which means we get as much demand and pressure from internal development teams using things like Kubernetes. They want to use all the cloud native tools, especially as they're moving to new cloud technologies. So that puts a lot of, we're definitely drinking our own champagne, eating our own dog food, all at the same time. And so that's been I think over the last year in particular, I think going forward, we'll see the customers will benefit from that because there's nothing more mission critical to Oracle than its mission critical applications too. Make sure they're available for customers. So that's SaaS application. That's applications that are moving maybe from an older cloud technology to the newer cloud technologies. And they're all pushing to serverless. They're pushing to Kubernetes. They're using all the new CI/CD technologies. So everything that we've been talking about applies internally to Oracle. And that just basically doubles down on the how sturdy and how bulletproof the underlying infrastructure has to be from a security perspective, from a performance perspective, and reliability perspective too. So.
Yeah, and then from like a more general perspective too, it's we have the cloud community and all of us end up reporting to Oracle Cloud, but there's been a lot of interest in some of the other stuff that we've released, over the last couple of years, like. The Held-On framework is very, very popular. A lot of people like using it because they want Java seemed like a very heavy and monolithic kind of thing, and Helidon kind of gives you a way to, like carve up your applications. And
What is it?
It's called Project Helidon.
Okay.
And
what is it?
It's basically a project where you can build like Java REST style applications in
Okay.
a simple kind of way.
It was a microservices framework they built for helping Java teams adopt microservices and bundle their Java applications as microservices. And so Helidon.io is an open source. We open source that and getting a lot of interest from there.
Okay.
Right, and Graal VM is the other one that we're working on that a lot of people are really
Right.
excited by. And Graal gives you kind of the capability where it's basically Java applications, and it's kind of VM for that. So when you want like really high performant to run really high performant Java applications, you can kind of use Graal behind the scenes to make those applications a little bit more performant. And that's like with the one that actually, like, I need to play a lot more with that, but a lot of people are really, really excited by that. Like whether it's customers, whether it's people in the field, and it's all kind of like open source from us.
And I think we've seen the growth of Java itself and the focus they've had to make it more and more cloud ready and cloud relevant. Smaller images, faster compilation times, tools like Helidon, tools like Graal VM. And the standard work that goes in now 6-month cycles, quick development cycles and release cycles for Java. All that stuff is creating new frameworks that are coming out, new applications being built on Java for a very enterprise scale cloud. We use it internally a lot too. But we're seeing folks like Spotify and Twitter. Every tweet that goes out is based upon a Graal VM. And that's based upon Java. So a lot of these cloud scale, web scale applications that are out there are built on Java. So we're seeing that's another kind of commitment where slow and steady progress and focusing on how to take the Java community forward has actually bloomed into huge new opportunities using Java for these mission critical apps in the web.
I think an important thing that all of this is leading to is all of these cloud native technologies are starting to be used by enterprises. Yep. The traditional applications that they're using, tools that they're using are also still being used, but they're introducing all of these new cloud native concepts and technologies, and that's going to change those technologies in certain ways as the enterprises find new ways to use them, new things that they need. So I'm excited over the next few years to see how Kubernetes and all these other cloud native projects change and adapt as enterprises start adopting them.
Kazan, I think you're going to be pretty busy next year. Cloud development. Yeah, I think you all are actually, and I just want to thank you all for coming into our studio here in Conference Room 2 at the Marriott Hotel in San Diego.
It's very classy.
For KubeCon, and so thank you very much for the discussion. I enjoyed hearing about the new offerings that you have, your commitment to the cloud native community and how that's playing into your own business and with your customers, the community overall in terms of how you're seeing it managed and these new projects you're talking about.
Great.
It's a lot going on, so thank you very much for all of your time.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank
Alex.
you.
Yeah.
This episode of the New Stack Makers is sponsored by Oracle. Oracle Cloud Native Labs is here to empower the next generation of cloud practitioners with a curated set of solutions, tutorials, and best practices, all designed to spark inspiration, drive hands-on experience, and unleash our industry's potential. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcast. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.